We have a presentation from Peter Blamey. Peter, who is sitting there, and can come down the front. Why not? Peter has a PhD in physics and began working on hearing when he became a member of Graham Clark's cochlear implant research team in 1979. He's a co-author on over 200 papers on hearing, sound processing, speech and language of children with impaired hearing, and on psychophysics. He is an inventor of 25 patent families for his hearing aids, bionic ears and now bionic eyes. He has been instrumental in spin-off and incubation of 4 companies from the Bionics Institute since the year 2000, including Dynamic Hearing, that has provided advanced signal processing technology in many millions of hearing aids globally. Peter is an executive director and co-owner of Blamey Saunders Hears, the company addressing the poor penetration of the hearing aid market in order to reduce the $12 billion annual burden of hearing loss in Australia. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Now, tonight, this is the second session that Peter's given. The first session is available to you, and I'd recommend you have a look at it because it's on the website in its entirety. Have a look at that. You might have had a bit of homework. But tonight, Peter is specifically talking about the IHearYou modern tele-audiology system. Professor Blamey will describe the Australian-developed tele-audiology system, IHearYou, that enables people to take control of their own hearing. This talk will describe the science behind it, how it works, and the benefits that it is bringing to individual listeners and the Australian economy. If you have a look at the previous talk, you'll see it covered a lot of the history of hearing aids and the fact that we have actually caught up to the year trumpet of the 1800s with the performance of our hearing aids. So now we leap into 2016 and beyond.
Great.
Thank you very much, Peter. Give him a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Graham. And I must say congratulations on the activities that you reported in your report. It's great to see that audio engineering is going so strong in Melbourne. So today I want to talk about something which is a bit different from last time. And I'll start by talking about the problem that Elaine Saunders and I set out to solve. It might seem a little bit surprising for an industry that's well over 50 years old, but conventional audiology is basically failing about 75% of its potential market. These are people who have hearing difficulties and who would benefit to a great extent by using hearing aids. And Blamey and Saunders was specifically set up for the purpose of trying to address this problem. And it's a very multifaceted problem. If you look at the pyramid on the right-hand side there, you'll see that people who have a profound hearing loss, a bit more than 50%, maybe about 70% of those people use hearing aids or cochlear implants, and the other 30% don't. They try to get along without them. If you go down to the moderate hearing loss region, then only about 50% of people with a moderate hearing loss use hearing aids. And if you get to the mild hearing loss area, then only about 10% of those people use hearing aids. But nevertheless, they would all benefit quite a lot if they did wear hearing aids. So why is the hearing aid market so poorly penetrated? The common excuses that people use, and this is a very individual thing, people make up their own mind whether they want to use hearing aids or not. Usually, occasionally they get talked into it by their spouse or somebody else, but not very often. Common excuses are, I don't have a hearing loss, I can't be bothered visiting an audiologist, hearing aids don't work very well, hearing aids are too expensive, hearing aids are hard to use, hearing aids will make me look older, and there's a stigma associated with wearing hearing aids. And they're all very common excuses, and there's been about 60 papers written in the last 20 years by a guy called Sergei Kochkin, who says the same thing every year. these same factors are the reasons for poor penetration. So we decided we'd take a slightly different approach from other people and try to address these excuses or these issues one by one and get rid of them if we could. And in order to do that, we needed some audio engineering and some knowledge about speech and acoustic phonetics, which I'll explain as I go along. So what our teleaudiology model, which we call IHearYou, enables customers to do is to test their hearing without going to an audiologist, to buy hearing aids without going to an audiologist, to customise them without going to an audiologist, and to receive support at home or anywhere they have a data connection. And you can probably guess why this makes a difference, because in the sale of hearing aids, in the hearing aid market, the audiologist is the middleman, and the audiologist makes most of the money. So if you can cut out the middleman, you can solve quite a few of these problems. But the reason why audiologists are so expensive and why they charge so much is because they use a lot of expensive equipment to measure hearing and to fit hearing aids. And the hearing aids themselves actually don't cost all that much, probably around about less than a quarter of the price that you pay is in the cost of the hearing aids as they're sold by the hearing aid manufacturers. And the hearing aid manufacturers are not poor either. In fact, the very biggest manufacturers, because of the volume of hearing aids that they make, can make them for under $200 US. So a pair of hearing aids that might cost $10,000, $12,000 when you buy them from an audiologist in the usual manner, cost somebody about $400 to make for the two of them. Now, there are various reasons that people use to try and justify that cost, and some of them are very good reasons as well, and we're only going to get away from those high prices if we completely change the system. And so that's what this talk is about, how we can change the system. So I want to go through these excuses or these issues one or two at a time and explain how we've used science to overcome these as issues and try to explain to potential hearing aid users why they ought to change their minds about not having a hearing loss or not being bothered to visit an audiologist. So let's look at the first one. I don't have a hearing loss. Now, if you think about speech and how it fits into the range of human hearing, it covers quite a broad frequency range from around about 200 or 150 hertz up to about 4, 5, 6 kilohertz. And it covers a fair range of the intensities as well, from around about 20 dB SPL up to about 75 or 70 at the peaks, and that's for a person speaking in a conversational level. People who are whispering, of course, use much lower levels, and people who are shouting use much higher levels. And in order to understand speech at all those different levels, you really need quite good hearing. This is a slide that I showed in my previous talk, and it basically shows that even if you have a very mild hearing loss, you're starting to lose some of the softer sounds in conversational speech. And if you have a severe hearing loss, you're basically not hearing even the loudest sounds in conversational speech. So this is why people with a severe hearing loss really need a hearing aid, because otherwise they're not going to hear most of the speech that's going on around them. But the consequence of the signal, the speech signal covering this frequency range and this intensity range, is that if you study the mistakes that people make when they're listening to speech, say for example in monosyllabic words where there's not much redundancy, you can actually tell which frequencies and which intensities they can hear and which ones they can't hear. And so doing a speech test like that, a monosyllabic word test, actually gives you a pretty good measure of hearing, and within certain limits we can predict the audiogram from a speech test. So we've developed an online speech perception test which is available from the Blamey Saunders website, and if you've got 5 or 10 minutes to spare you can do it at home, and it tells us and it tells you how you're doing. So if you score more than 44 words correct out of 50, and if you get one consonant wrong, then that's one whole word wrong. If you get one vowel wrong, that's another whole word wrong. But if you get slightly more than 90% correct, then we say you've got good hearing. And if you get less than that, then you probably have a hearing loss, provided that English is your first language and you have no other linguistic processing problems. So we've used this word test now within our database at Blamey Saunders. We've got something like 40,000 of these results. And one of the good things about doing audiology and working with people online is that you can collect a lot of data in a very short time. We put this test up on our website at the end of about 2013, so it's been going for just under 3 years now. If we'd been a big hearing aid company and we'd done this, we probably would have had 3 million of these results by now, which would have been a fantastic resource to use for developing better hearing aids and better ways of fitting them. But we're doing okay with 35,000, I think, with a very small company here in Melbourne. So if you do the test, just after you've finished it, a graph like this pops up on your computer screen or your mobile phone screen if you're using a phone. And at the top up here, it tells you how many vowels correct you got, how many consonants correct, how many words correct, and it tells you how many words you didn't answer for, which are completely missed. And down here on this graph, there are 10 bars that indicate whether you heard the nasality of nasal consonants or not, whether you got the vowel height. That's the difference between an E and an R. It's the tongue height in the mouth. The manner of consonants, whether you can tell the difference between fricatives and stops and other types of consonants, whether you got voicing correct, whether you got a vowel contour. This is in diphthongs, the formant frequencies follow a contour, and whether you got that contour right. The vowel place, the highest point in the tongue, can determine the place of vowels. Vowel length, whether it's a long vowel or a short vowel. Affrication, whether it's an F or another fricative or a different type of sound. Sibilance, whether it's an S or a Z or a lower frequency sound. And the place of consonants. Now these are ordered from left to right because the speech features on the left are characterised by a large amount of low frequency information, and the ones on the right are characterised by quite a lot of high frequency information, and the ones in the middle are a mix of different frequencies and various things. It's actually a bit more complicated than that, but the way that we arrive at this graph is by looking at the errors that people make in the 50 words. So there are 100 consonants and there are 50 vowels. We tried to do this with the common AB word test that audiologists use all the time, which only has 10 words, and it didn't work at all. The statistics are just not good enough to give you a reasonable answer. So instead of using 30 seconds worth of speech. We used 5 minutes worth of speech and got something that is much more reliable and works very well. We use percent correct is actually not quite right. It's actually the percentage of information transmitted. So if you made a consistent error all the time, then you would still have 100% information transmission. So if all the M's you called N's and vice versa, that you'd still get 100% on nasality and place for those particular consonants. The reason we use information transmission is that it means we can mix up the consonants. We don't always use the same words, so you can't learn the word test, but there are the same number of nasals and fricatives and stops and same number of each vowel. The whole list is phonetically balanced so that you're always tested on the same vowels and consonants, but they occur in different words. So if we use percentage correct, then we get a slightly different answer for each word test, I think. So there's quite a lot of science just in designing the test. It turns out to be pretty good at detecting hearing loss. We did a small study with about 88 people in it, and the green bars show the number of words correct across the horizontal axis in this histogram, and up here is the interesting spot. All of the people with good hearing scored 44 or more, and most of the people with a measurable hearing loss scored less than 44. So we've since collected a lot more data, and the sensitivity and the specificity aren't quite as good as shown up there, but it's still much better than the test that's most commonly used as a screening test for hearing, which is the telephone digit test in noise. So if you go to most hearing aid company websites, or you do this test online, you'll hear sets of 3 digits in noise that gradually gets louder relative to the digits, and your job is to repeat back the digits by typing them in on your phone. And that has about 80% sensitivity and about 83% specificity. So this word test, that doesn't take much longer to do, is actually much more accurate in terms of defining the hearing loss, and it also tells us a lot more about your hearing because it's got frequency-specific information in it. Okay, so if you do this test, you can tell whether or not you've got a hearing loss, and you don't have to go to the audiologist to do it. But there are a lot of other reasons why you may go to an audiologist, and one of the main reasons is to get your audiogram, because in some parts of the world, like most American states, for example, you can't buy a hearing aid without having had an audiology test and without an audiogram. So this is one of the ways in which audiologists control the market in America. You have to see one, otherwise the person selling you a hearing aid is committing an offence, and they can be fined for doing so. It's not the same in Australia, though. So this data here, each red dot there is one or more of 492 hearing aid users who did both the speech perception test and an audiogram. Some of these people with pure tone average hearing thresholds at 4 frequencies with an average less than 25 would not be able to buy a hearing aid in America, even though we can show that they benefit from that hearing aid. So this is a case where the law and conventional wisdom about hearing aids and who needs one and who will benefit from one actually got it quite wrong. And the reason that a lot of these people wear hearing aids is that they may have tinnitus, for example, and wearing a hearing aid helps most people with tinnitus. They may also have a lot of problems in background noise, even though their hearing thresholds are not more than 25 dB SPL, or dB hearing level at least, I should say. The other thing you can see from this is that there's a very strong correlation between the hearing loss and the score on the speech perception test. And that correlation persists across the different frequencies. If you look at just one frequency at a time, instead of this average, you find that you can come up with a linear combination of the speech feature information transmission coefficients that is very highly correlated with individual frequencies. And by doing a principal components analysis of the information transmission and coefficients and the known thresholds for 408 people, we were able to come up with a formula that predicts the audiogram from the speech perception test. And it works pretty well in a lot of cases. And this is an example. This was a person who had had a hearing loss from quite a young age, and unaided she scored 6 words correct out of 50 and gave this pattern of information transmission coefficients. And as you can see, she did much better in the low frequency ones and a lot worse in the high frequency ones. And even though she only got 6 words correct, that was 31 out of 100 consonants correct and 18 out of 50 vowels correct. And the pattern of those errors is what enabled us to get this kind of a curve. And over here, the red line shows the audiogram measured in this young lady's right ear, and the blue line shows the audiogram measured in the left ear. And the green line is the audiogram predicted from this test here that was done binaurally. So what we've found by experience is that the audiogram predicted from the speech perception test follows pretty closely the audiogram in the better ear. So when you're listening with 2 ears, you're getting most of the information from the better ear. And we get quite close correspondences, like this, with a few exceptions. So you'll notice that we're not doing all that well here at the lowest frequency, 250 hertz. And that's because at 250 hertz, there's not much sound in speech, not much important information below 30 dB. So if you've got a hearing loss that's less than 30 dB, it's not going to make any difference to this because we're not really testing those low levels at that low frequency. And the same thing happens at the high frequency end. There's not much high frequency information above about 80 dB or 75 dB, and so you can't really measure hearing losses that are greater than 75 or 80 dB with this speech perception test. If you have a hearing loss that's greater than that, then you're not doing any worse than somebody with a hearing loss of 75 or 80. So as long as we're careful at the low intensity end and the high intensity end, then this is a pretty good measure of hearing. And it turns out that if you want to fit a hearing aid, you really need to know what people are hearing at conversational speech levels. You don't actually care too much what's the softest sound they can hear, or whether it's 80 dB or higher than 80 dB for the threshold. You need to do a similar thing with the hearing aid fitting in order to give them a good result. So even though we know that the audiogram that we get from here is not perfect, it's certainly great for fitting hearing aids. And in fact, I'll show you in a minute that it works better than the audiogram. Okay, so you don't need to go to the audiologist to get an audiogram unless you live in America. Okay, so in fact, this is better than going to the audiologist because you can do it anywhere. You can do it, in the Northern Territory, as long as you've got a phone connection or you've got an internet connection, you can do this and satisfy yourself as to whether or not you've got a hearing loss. And you can also find out enough about your hearing for Blamey Saunders to be able to sell you a hearing aid and pre-fit it with your hearing loss so that by the time you get it, it's already set up for you. Okay, so let's think about the question about hearing aids not working very well. Well, if you were here for my previous talk, you will have heard that hearing aids have changed a lot, and as Graham pointed out, they now work better than an ear trumpet, whereas for the last 50 years it was touch and go as to which was better. If you wanted to carry around an ear trumpet about this big and put it in your ear, you would do as well as you would with a hearing aid, provided that you had a mild or moderate hearing loss. If you had a severe hearing loss, then probably the ear trumpet wouldn't do you that much good. But now hearing aids do work well. And we've used the same speech perception test to show people how much benefit they get. So this is the same young lady that scored 6 words out of 50. And we used this result to fit hearing aids to this lady, and she scored 38 out of 50. So that's a huge improvement. And when she came to us, she was actually wearing hearing aids that had been fitted in the conventional way. They weren't Blamey Saunders hearing aids. She thought they were pretty good. She'd paid £4,000 for a pair of hearing aids in the UK. And with those hearing aids, she scored 26 out of 50. So by fitting the hearing aids in a different way and by using different technology in the hearing aids, we bumped up that score by an extra 12 words out of 50. Okay, so we've done the same sort of testing with people, a large number of people, and I think this is the same number, 492 people who did the unaided speech perception test before, and these are their aided scores now on the same test. And if we, I think I might have shown these graphs in the previous talk. If you look at the amount of benefit versus hearing loss, so this is the difference between the unaided and aided scores, and this is the 4 frequency pure tone average thresholds across here. You see that the amount of benefit can be quite large for some people, like 40 words out of 50. That's a bit suspicious actually if somebody gets that much benefit and they've only got a 25 dB hearing loss, so something may have gone wrong there. But in the main, there's an increase in benefit until you get up to about 50 or 55 decibels of pure tone average hearing loss, which is right in the middle of the moderate range, and then it starts to go down a bit. And if you do this with an individual, usually they show quite a good benefit, and so that demonstration that an individual benefits from hearing aids is very powerful and helps them to understand why they should think seriously about paying some money and actually doing a bit better in their hearing. If you look at the same data in a slightly different way, so here I've plotted the aided score versus the unaided score and draw a line or fit a line to this data, you can see that roughly speaking, the number of errors that people make at every point along that line is about half what they were making when they were unaided. So you put on a hearing aid, you'll score, or you'll make about half as many errors as you were making without the hearing aid. And that young lady went from 6 out of 50 to 38 out of 50, so she actually did a bit better than that. She made 44 mistakes unaided, and actually it's exactly right, 22. Is that right? No, 12. Sorry, can't do arithmetic in my head. And so she did a little bit better than halving her error rate. But on average, people do halve their error rate. And this might seem like quite an artificial testing situation where you're trying to recognise words on their own, and they're quite difficult words with very little redundancy. And so people are often surprised at how many mistakes they make. But if there is some well-known science that tells you the relationship between a word score and a sentence score. And this particular graph came from a paper by Ken Grant in 1997, but I think there are some much earlier graphs that look a bit like this from the Bell Telephone Company and very early work done on the intelligibility of speech over the telephone. And it's well known that words are much harder to recognise than sentences. So, for example, if you're scoring about 20% words on this graph here, that corresponds to about 55-58% of sentences correct, words in sentences correct. If you're scoring 80% on words, then you're getting about 95% correct in sentences. And so our criterion for a hearing loss, which is about 90% of words correct, corresponds to about 99% of words in sentences correct. And this is one of the reasons why people don't realise when they've got a mild hearing loss. It's really only in very difficult listening situations that hearing loss starts to affect your speech perception. So if somebody's spelling their name over the telephone, probably most of us have experienced cases where we got that wrong because the sounds of letters are all quite similar. So to tell a B from a P over the phone is not that easy, especially if you've got a hearing loss of any kind. So that's the kind of effect that leads to this kind of prediction for what people will do. So if we convert our word scores to sentence scores, and again plot the estimated aided score versus the estimated unaided score and draw that regression line again, we find that in sentences with hearing aids, these people on average made about 1/4 as many errors in sentences, or we would predict that they're doing quite a lot better in sentences. And there are other ways as well of looking at the benefit of hearing aids. This is a bit less convincing. It's based on a hearing aid performance questionnaire, and you do this questionnaire imagining what sort of problems you would have in the unaided condition and what sort of problems you would have in the aided condition, and it shows that the percentage of problems goes down a lot when you have a hearing aid. It doesn't go down to zero with this one. This is for listening in quiet, and it does, if you project this line downwards, it does cross the zero problems axis at about 0 dB hearing loss. It also shows that the percentage of problems is reduced by hearing aids even for very severe hearing aids, but hearing in quiet is only one of the situations you need to look at. And I don't think I put in the graph in noise. I did show it last time, but it's a little different. The percentage of problems that people have in noise doesn't go down to zero if you've got perfect hearing, and if you do wear hearing aids, there's a reduction in that percentage of problems. Okay, so realistically, what should people expect when they are wearing hearing aids? And these are just conclusions that have come out of the last few years of research that we've done with people wearing our hearing aids. They can expect about half the numbers of errors in difficult listening situations in quiet. In running speech, about a quarter of the number of errors. A person with a mild hearing loss will perform like a person with normal hearing. A person with moderate hearing loss will perform like a person with a mild hearing loss. And a person with a severe hearing loss will perform like a person with a moderate hearing loss. So these are quite noticeable differences. Let's move on to the next problem, that hearing aids are too expensive. And as I explained before, making a cheaper hearing aid actually isn't going to solve the problem. You have to sell the hearing aid more cheaply, which means that you have to provide the services more cheaply. Just to go into this in a little bit more depth, these prices are a little bit out of date, but this pyramid of technology was published by Connect Hearing, one of the big hearing aid chains that's actually owned by a hearing aid manufacturer. And this is a common trend these days, that hearing aid manufacturers are coveting the money that audiologists are making, and so they've started to employ the audiologists and keep that extra margin for themselves. So an entry-level hearing aid that probably cost about $200 to make, they're selling for $1,300 and up. A premium digital hearing aid that also probably cost about $200 to make, they're selling for $5,500 and up. Well, they were in 2013. These prices have probably gone up by $1,000 or $2,000 at this end and stayed about the same at the bottom end. So we reckon that our hearing aids are as good as these ones because we don't spend any more to make the premium ones, but we sell them at what we think is a reasonable price. And so we have all the features of this, with one exception. We don't so far make Bluetooth enabled hearing aids, so we don't have wireless communication with the hearing aids or between hearing aids. But we do have all the other features, and we provide a self-fitting system and online support that's free. And we sell a hearing aid for $1,400 for our cheapest model, and about $2,000 for the more expensive one. Now, so there's a big saving, and all of that saving comes from the provision of services. So what we've done is we've unbundled the cost of services from the cost of the hearing aid. So when you buy a hearing aid from us, you really only pay for the hearing aid. And by using our speech perception tests and by having highly trained staff on the phone or available over the internet, and allowing you to do most of the work yourself at home, we can charge zero for the services apart from repairs, for example. So instead of going to an audiologist, you do the speech test, tells us about our hearing. This triaging here determines what you need, whether you need a hearing aid or not, and if you do need a hearing aid, do you have a severe to profound hearing loss, in which case we recommend that you go and make an appointment in a clinic. And if you live in Perth, for example, You can go to a local clinic in Perth and pay the normal clinic prices, or you can come to Melbourne, go to the Melbourne clinic, have a week's holiday and go back and still have more money left in your pocket after you've fitted the hearing aids. And quite a lot of people do that. So it's really the business model that's making hearing aids so expensive. It's not the actual devices. And although it's probably not what an audio engineer wants to hear, making a better hearing aid cheaper is actually not going to change the prices at all, because it doesn't matter how good the technology really is. And in fact, with digital technology, a cheap hearing aid costs the same as an expensive one to make. It's really only the software or the firmware inside the hearing aid that introduces the extra features, with the exception of wireless, I should say. Wireless hearing aids cost quite a lot more to make. Okay. So these is a bit more background information about the consequences of this. In 2012, there were about 800 audiology clinics in Australia, and you might have thought that was plenty, but actually it's not enough, really. And today there are over 1,700, and they are mostly in chains of hearing aid companies that really only sell one or two brands of hearing aids. But because there are more clinics, it's only going to get more expensive to buy hearing aids. It's not going to get any cheaper if we continue with this business model. Because Blamey Saunders can service people all around Australia, our number of clients is actually about 20 times the average number in these 1,700 other clinics. And so we use our online business model to sell to more people and to support more people. And those people, this pie chart shows their distribution in different states. And this pie chart here, which looks very similar, is the total population in each state. So we're getting pretty good coverage with our online business model around the different states of Australia. This one over here is Victoria, and you can see even though we had only one clinic, and that was in Victoria, it didn't reduce the number of online customers we had. About 50% of our customers don't come into the clinic. And over here, this is the distribution of clinic customers from different states, and you can see about a quarter of them travel interstate to come and see us. Typically they would only see us once to have the hearing aids fitted, and then they'd get the rest of their service online. And so we can provide clinic service cheaper in our clinic than other clinics can as well by using this special technology that we've got. Okay, so let's go down to hearing aids are hard to use. Well, why are they hard to use? One reason is because if you want to make a change, you've got to go and visit your audiologist who makes the change for you. So we've overcome that problem, and there are others as well that I'll mention in a minute. So we've spent a lot of time making our fitting software easy to use. And this is one thing that has always puzzled me about conventional audiology, is that hearing aids are perceived to be very hard to fit. But the more features you put into the hearing aid, the easier they ought to get to fit, and so the ones with more features should be cheaper than the ones with few features, because it's actually hard to make a very basic hearing aid do all the right things. The other thing is that the conventional audiology model makes you pay for extra features, and so they try to figure out which ones you don't need. But actually everybody listens to speech and noise, and everybody has pretty much the same problems, and everybody will benefit from those extra features just as much. There's no reason why you should have to pay an extra $3,000 for a hearing aid that works well in background noise. So what we've done is we have provided software and a system so that people can use this device down here. This is a Bluetooth device that you can connect to your phone or to your PC and connect via the wires to the hearing aids, and then you can use your phone or your PC to adjust all of the settings in the hearing aid. And you can do it if you're interested in getting your hearing aids to work better down the pub. You can do it down the pub while you're listening to your mates and tune up the sound for that particular scenario. And we've got some of the more common issues that people have with a one-click solution that will improve the fitting for the hearing aid. And we now have data for tens of thousands of hearing aid fittings that we can use to improve the intelligence behind this particular piece of software. So the software itself is called IHearYou, but we call the hearing aids and the software and the business model together the IHearYou system. And over the last 2 years, we've compared two groups of people, about 500 people in each, who fitted their own hearing aids using the infogram or the speech perception test result, and people who were fitted conventionally, in the clinic using an audiogram with exactly the same hearing aids, and pretty comparable groups, but the ones who fitted themselves actually did statistically significantly better in terms of the benefit they got. And that's probably, I think, not because of the system, but because those people actually understand what they want to hear a bit better than the audiologist does. So when you think about it, the audiologist is always using second-hand information. It's what you tell them that you want, and depending on how well they can read your mind, they'll do a better or a worse job. Typically, the audiologists that spend more time do a better job, but that's why it costs so much. The other big advantage is that we can provide services and advice anywhere and any time. Audiologists are not keen to do this, but you could go to an audiologist anywhere in the world and we could tell them all about your hearing and how to fit our hearing aids to them. So that remote support can be done through an audiologist, through an ENT, through a GP, through your son-in-law if he's good at computers, through anybody. And the records are available as well if you sign up to My Health Records. Okay, so this is a long and boring list of why the SPT is actually better than an audiogram, and I think we have the scientific data to prove that now. Okay, so these three questions in red at the bottom: hearing aids are hard to use, hearing aids will make me look older, and there's a stigma associated with wearing hearing aids. These are all things that are hard to tackle with technology, but we're going to have a go. At the moment, we're about halfway through setting up manufacturing in Melbourne and working with a company called Extel Technologies, and the hearing aids that they're going to make for Blamey Saunders are designed to be easier to use. They're designed to look quite different from ordinary hearing aids and have a distinctive shape and colour and so on. We hope that particularly women might like to show them off to their friends. Men will still be able to hide them behind their ears. And we hope to overcome the stigma to a certain extent. We're having these hearing aids designed by a great young person called Leah Heiss, who is a medical device jewellery designer at RMIT. And so these will be something special. I'm not sure that it's really going to make the diehards change their minds about things like stigma and making them look older. But there is actually one study that shows that people with hearing aids behind their ears are judged to be more trustworthy than people who don't wear hearing aids. Okay, so, and personally, I'd rather that I looked older than people thought I was older, because I made all those mistakes in listening to what they were saying. So this is really just a summary slide. The thing that really drives what we're doing is that it's client-centred. Our hearing aids are made for people to use. They're not made for audiologists to fit and make lots of money out of. And there are some differences between what we do and what conventional audiology does. Every difference we could think of was in favour of Blamey Saunders. It's client-centred, it's a wellness model instead of a disability model. You get personalised sound quality because you do it yourself. It's affordable, the pricing is transparent. It's flexible, you can choose the level of support that you want, and it's convenient. You can get immediate help wherever you are. And if you compare those same sorts of things for conventional audiology, it's not as good. And the last point I want to make is that developing systems like this across the whole of the healthcare spectrum is not an option. It's not optional, it's obligatory. If we don't save about half or more of the money that state government spends on healthcare, that healthcare budget is going to exceed 100% of the state government's revenues by 2043. So obviously it's quite a long way before that. If we still want the state to pay for schools and other essential things like roads and things, we've got to do a much better job of health. And I think this is the tele-audiology area is probably the area where we are the furthest ahead. So we're not just looking for a cheaper way to deliver the services that you can get today through a conventional clinic. We are actually delivering better services, and we're doing it faster and we're doing it cheaper. And if that same logic was applied to the engineering and the medicine for other healthcare things, then I think we would all benefit a great deal in the long run. So it seems rather amazing to me, but knowing a lot about acoustic phonetics is actually going to save Australia a hell of a lot of money over the next 20 years. Thank you.
Right. Questions? Mark.
Thank you. That's an amazing presentation. A couple of questions for you. First one is around the online system for speech perception. Obviously everyone's got different computers, different headphones, they'll possibly be listening at different levels. How do you, or can you go through some sort of calibration system where you sort of standardise the experience that people have when they're taking the test?
We try to, yes. So what we recommend is that people have a person with normal hearing or near normal hearing listen to some running speech at the beginning and adjust it to a comfortable level. That will get us to something like plus or minus 6 dB of where we want to be, and that amount of variation in the input levels is not going to make a big difference to the main information that we want to get out of that study. We're really interested mostly in the frequency shape of the hearing loss, and so as long as it's not way too loud or way too soft, then we're going to get a good shape out of that. The fitting of the hearing aids themselves compensates for errors in that system, because when you can listen to sounds through the hearing aids and balance the loudness, that will take into account any acoustic differences in the in the ear canal for the specific person. It will also take into account the fact that the speech perception test might have been done a little bit too loud or a bit too soft, and so it's not exactly a self-calibrating system, but it's a self-adjusting system that compensates for errors in the process.
And can I ask how much pushback have you had from the conventional audiology industry? That's obviously, they're making a decent amount of money out of that industry, and we're about to disrupt it a bit like Uber disrupted the taxi industry. How much
Can you give us a
pushback
bit
have you
more,
had?
Welly, for those of us who haven't got hearing aids?
Yeah, so the question is about how much pushback have we had from conventional audiology, and the answer is heaps. They really don't like us. They haven't liked us for about 4 or 5 years now, but they're starting to like us a little bit more, and we've got some of the bigger companies asking us, how do you do it? How can you sell hearing aids for a third of the price that we do and still have a profitable business? And they really want to know the answers, and I think imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so I think they're basically starting to take notice, and I think that we will really be able to change the industry. We don't actually need to sell hearing aids to 4 million Australians every year, but they think they do. But so I don't mind if people copy us and everybody benefits, then so will we. That's a fantastic outcome as far as I'm concerned. So we've been running now for 4 years, and we've been profitable for 4 years at a reasonable level. We employ 33 people now, as from the end of August we will, and and we're entering a new phase. I think now that the limitation for Blamey Saunders is not a technological one; it's how many salespeople we can employ and how quickly we can get the message out there to the people that need us.
Second. Graham. Oh, you had another question?
Localisation. I mean, obviously it's in English at the moment. How are you going with localising it for other languages?
Yeah, we've concentrated on...
Question, did you...
Yeah. He's asking about localisation. Are we looking at this in languages other than English? The answer is no, not yet, but there are a couple of options. I think we'll probably end up using nonsense syllables with the phonemes from different languages. But we have looked at an American English version, and we're working on a New Zealand English version at the moment. We'll probably have an Indian accented version quite soon as well, but we've employed a Spanish speaker who's going to help us with a Spanish version next. But they don't have enough vowels to make it really work all that well, I don't think. Yeah.
That's it, you only get through. Yes, Graham.
2 questions.
Sure.
Is there a fee for that online service you provide?
No.
It's free.
So if you buy hearing aids, then you get free online service for the lifetime of the hearing aid.
They do this test, you do the test, and it's free.
Yep, you do the test and
you
it's
get
free.
a result from your test.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
The other second question is there a question on tomorrow night's census form about hearing impaired people? I haven't done my census yet.
I don't know the answer to that, but I think there used to be.
There is
Yep.
general questions on health.
Yep. Yeah.
I can't remember.
And
That's
can I just have
2.
one? No, with the accent, there is accents from Filipino accent to Indian accent to all sorts of accents. How do you overcome that with your tests there? I mean, the accents trick us more than the actual, enunciations of it that goes on.
Yeah.
I have trouble with the accents.
I haven't done a lot of research into that, but we will need to do it soon. I know for people with Australian accents doing the American test and vice versa, we get slightly different patterns of errors. But when you do this information transmission and look at features, the differences tend to wash out a bit, because the errors that people make are usually from one speech sound to another one which has the same features.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, John.
Just one observation about the audiology profession. It has a role in other than just hearing loss. Personally, and I'm thinking of industrial health and safety, where you actually require calibrations to meet legal defined measures of loss. If their hearing aid business goes, it's a situation similar to the legal profession, which had the conveyancing business removed from it, and which was profitable, also put a lot of money through their trust funds, and the interest earned on the trust fund went to fund legal aid. That went away. The question that I was about technique is there a difference, or do you have a recommendation as to whether the hearing test is done using loudspeakers or headphones, and does it make a difference?
Yes, so we do use the speech perception test in our clinic, where we can control all of these things, and it's a highly calibrated system. They like to do it under headphones, because then they can get a monaural result and compare the two ears. I prefer it to be done under in a free field, binaurally, because then you can compare the aided and unaided results. If you do it under headphones, and I've had an example of an audiologist who tried to do it aided under headphones and got a very poor result, and I would have thought the audiologist should have known better, but this is one of the issues that we have with audiologists as a company. They charge a lot of money on the basis that they've had 2 years of training to do a particular job, but they spend very little time actually learning about how to fit hearing aids, and yet that's where they make most of their money. So the conveyancing example that you gave is a good one, that people charge lots of money for doing jobs that they really don't have a huge amount of training for, and even though it may have consequences like supporting free legal aid, I think they don't put all of that money that they make into free legal aid. So there's I think we have to get fair income about this, and that comes into this question of transparency of pricing. I agree that audiologists do a lot of other things than hearing aids, and they should charge for those other things. We charge more for other things in our clinic.
I don't.
And their clerks used to do the conveyancing anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all black for audiologists, because Blamey Saunders does employ them from time. You do employ them.
We do, yes.
Growth market.
There you go.
Yep.
There was you had. Yes.
You mentioned your preference is that the online test is done free field using speakers, is that right?
Yes.
So, to just reiterate, so what that means is that someone, for example, with a minimal hearing loss in one ear, but a moderate or profound in the other, you still get a result which is near enough to good enough for creating that audiogram. Is that right?
So a case like that, yeah, it will give you a good result for the better ear.
Right.
For the poorer ear, then we need to go back to Mark's question about levels and the actual fitting process.
So it comes
We-
out
we-
in the wash later.
It does, yes, that's right. So, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Congratulations on a fine presentation. Two quick questions. One is the audiology industry in any way regulated, or are there certain minimum certifications required by audiologists?
It's a self-regulated
Right.
system.
Okay.
So there are two organisations. The Audiological Society of Australia, who I think have just changed their name. I can't remember what it is. And then there's the Academy of Audiology in Australia. And they have slightly different rules about things. There used to be, the Academy of Audiology used to be the Audiometrists Association. So we used to have audiologists who did most audiology things and audiometrists who really only fitted hearing aids and actually did a pretty good job of it. And the Academy of Audiology, we're on much better terms with them than we are with the Audiological Society of Australia. And in fact, they seem to be a lot more progressive. We couldn't find an audiologist who had good enough training for what we wanted recently, and so we hired a doctor of audiology from the US. And in order to become a member of the Audiological Society of Australia, despite the fact that he's had more training than most Australian audiologists, he would have to do some extra exams and work as an intern for a year and do a few other ridiculous things. And so, but the Academy of Audiology recognises his American qualification. Yeah, we've also just had one of our other audiologists trained in the UK for a similar reason.
More questions? Yes, Jim, and then...
Thank you. Another very interesting presentation. I had to receive a flyer today in the mailbox for a local audiologist who's just set up. One of the claims she was making in there was something to do with live speech processing. Do you know what she may have been referring to? It's some sort of ongoing adaptation along while you're actually wearing the hearing aids. It sounds like it's...
Yeah, no, I don't know especially what it is, but if you'd like to send me an email with the brand of the hearing aid in it, then I'd be happy to look into it. There's various sorts of adaptive processing in hearing aids, and they're quite often given exotic names, so it might be something relatively ordinary, but who knows.
Yes.
What's the relationship with your way of going about delivering hearing aids to people compared and how Medicare and the private health industry would treat you compared to going through an audiologist?
We're treated the same way as anybody else, partly because my business partner, Elaine Saunders, is an audiologist and has a provider number. And we have a special deal actually with one of the health funds, HCF. Most of their members are in New South Wales, but if you're an HCF member, then you can get a reduction in the price of Blamey Saunders hearing aids.
A great stampede will now occur. More questions? Yes?
Does there need to get a FDA approval for IHearYou?
To sell it in America, yes, we would need to do that. The FDA approval is usually on the hearing aids themselves rather than on the fitting system. But the hearing aids are type 2A medical devices and as such would need FDA approval. So the regulations in the US, though, as I said before, are about the fitting of the hearing aids. You have to have an audiogram. It doesn't matter what the hearing aid is like. If you don't have an audiogram, then it can't be sold as a hearing aid. So what's happening in America is that there are devices that are called PSAPs, Personal Sound Amplification Products, and what differentiates them from hearing aids is that they're not allowed to be customised to your individual audiogram. They can be sold over the counter and they can have a number of fixed fittings and you can select the one you like, but you can't, you know, if they can be customised to your hearing, you're not allowed to sell them other than through an audiologist.
So reading glasses at pharmacies, in other words, like off the shelf, one plus one plus two.
It's open to negotiation, isn't it?
That's right. They're still about $600 each, so they're not...
Sounds like it comes up under the national realm of audiologists in America, the NRA.
Yes, that's right.
There was an attempt. Questions?
Carl, can I have one more?
Yeah, I'm giving him for hello, and then you.
I think we touched on it at the last presentation with regards to processing power and related to the size of the devices and understanding that the battery is also significant in size. And can you see the industry moving towards a processing within smartphone to try and minimise the size of the hearing aid and to give much more power and sensitivity to the processing of the data that's needed? Do you see that that's potentially a way that the market may move or not?
Yes, there are already apps that you can buy for a phone for $5 or something, I think, that turns your phone into a body-worn hearing aid.
But I'm more thinking of
Yes, what you
still
mean?
having a hearing aid,
Yep.
that sophisticated, specially made device, but having the processing and the control elsewhere, not in the device.
Offload it to something.
Yeah, offload it to something with some serious.
Does it need offloading?
Yeah.
Would there be problems with latency?
Yeah, there would be problems with latency, and that would actually increase the power consumption of the phone, because the wireless transmission would use about 10 times as much power as the hearing aid does already.
But given the fact that one of the latest gadget fads is wearables, wearable technology with your Fitbits and your smartwatches and all that sort of thing, maybe the hearing aid will become just another wearable gadget.
Yes, yeah, I think that is quite likely, and I think once we do have very low power communication, then the hearing aids will actually become a data gathering device, and that will be downloaded every time you recharge the battery or something, and so there'll be a lot of data available.
And I'm going to offer a
The
comment.
hearing aids use lithium batteries, don't they? Lithium?
Is that your
By
question?
chance you jumped
Is that
in the
your
shower,
question?
This is my question. Jumped in the shower and you had your hearing aids on and your batteries got wet. They're known to fizzle and carry on and explode.
Blamey Saunders hearing aids use zinc air batteries, and we're about to start looking at silver zinc rechargeable batteries. So, but cochlear implants have lithium batteries in them.
Thank you.
Mark, you've had three. Okay, no, go on.
I mean, this whole thing with the legal system in the States strikes me as strange, because there's a lot of companies that are, producing like Bluetooth, earbuds for people to wear and connect up to their iPhones. I mean, it strikes me as that's not vastly different to what a hearing aid could look like if you designed it that way. And you can possibly get around the legal issues by just calling them that. I mean,
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know.
I've just received a set of bone conduction headphones, and I probably should have brought them along, but those are tiny things that sit over your ear and send sound into your ears through your bones. And they are almost invisible, those things. They're tiny, and they've got inbuilt microphones which are clever and noise cancelling. So maybe it will be a shift towards more what Peter was saying, where people are happy. I mean, I've seen people wearing strange-looking apparatus which are Bluetooth phones on their ears, so maybe it will shift.
Is there a shift in social paradigm that says it's now acceptable, almost expected, to have earphones or earbuds, the cord hanging out of your ear? And this may be a trend of the body-worn headphone may come back, implanted another device, but otherwise we're going back to the dear old National Health Service hearing aid of the 1940s.
Yeah.
I think I might declare it that we've had a really good go with the questions, and we could continue after we close the session. But I'd like to really thank Peter for a most informative and pretty inspiring pair of talks, including tonight's. If you didn't get a chance to see the previous talk, I'd recommend it to you on the aesmelbourne.org.au website. Look it up. And let's all thank Peter for coming along and giving us a lot of education.
Really enjoyed it.